All right, hey friends, welcome to the Deeper Bible Podcast. We're a show about God's wisdom for everyone. And we want to go super deep into the scriptures, into some ideas in theology and philosophy, and also into practical wisdom for our life today. Hey, if you find today's conversation helpful, do us a favor. We'd love for you to like it, subscribe to our channel, leave a comment, drop a review, share with your friends, all the stuff. My name's Ryan, and today I'm sitting with a special guest, a friend of mine and an NBA basketball agent. His name's Bill Duffy, and Bill has been a friend and a member of our church for a long time, but his day job puts him in some pretty interesting circles. Bill, can I brag about you for a second, just to introduce you to our listeners?
Yeah, after you say that I'm a 30-year member of our church, that's the most
30
important thing.
years. Yeah, I mean, you
Absolutely.
are the picture of faithfulness, and I'm not sure if many people around here know what you do in your day job, but it's pretty darn interesting. You have represented since the 90s some of the biggest names in professional basketball, from Steve Nash to Yao Ming, and a lot of the current players too. Luka Doncic, whom I love and is in the NBA Finals right now. Anthony Edwards, DeAndre Ayton, RJ Barrett. I'm a big Duke fan, so I was stoked when you picked him up. The Warriors' own Brandon Podziemski. We got WNBA star Sabrina Ionescu. Huge contracts being negotiated, and some pretty big personalities too that you're shepherding. And before you became an agent, uh, you played some college hoops in Minnesota and Santa Clara, then in the NBA with the Nuggets. But what I've really learned from Bill is just getting a sense of the reputation you have in your world for wisdom and for integrity, for caring for your people, not just on the court and not just during the season of being an athlete, but long term in their life and taking a long term trajectory towards well-rounded life opportunities, the kind of things that players today are thinking about in their post career stage. And but just circling back to where we began, Bill, I've just come to know you as an awesome, humble, fun, modest, generous person. So thanks for making some time for this today. We're going to talk about the idea of celebrity and integrity. How in the world that you move in, what does it mean to be a person of integrity? What are the pressures that make that uniquely hard? What are the practices that can make it possible and to shine a light? So, there's a story in the Bible. Maybe we'll kick off here. In the book of Genesis, chapter 11, we read about the Tower of Babel. And there we hear that the people are trying to make a name for themselves. And that's why it all backfires. But then in chapter 12 of Genesis, we meet Abraham. And he's this nomad shepherd. And God says, I will make your name great. And so it's this contrast between making a name great for yourself and God making your name great. And it seems to me that we live in a culture, the Tower of Babel syndrome, where everybody's trying to make their name great. Fame, everybody's trying to be famous, even pastors. The church is not exempt here. I'm curious about your vantage from the inside on the world of fame. What is that? What does the view look like from there? What does that do to people? How do you think about that whole question? What does it seem like to you?
Yeah. Well, there's a lot here, but going back to my and my family's, you know, commitment to our church was we actually discovered the church. There was a young lady who was a babysitter of ours, and she came from a kind of sketchy background, and she was a wild young girl, and we kind of took her in a little bit. And we hadn't found a church when we moved to the East Bay. And she'd gone to the church and she told us about it. And you would have never thought that she would have been the impetus for us going to the church and then be there for 30 years. So you just never know who's going to lead you.
Right.
It didn't have to be some super successful business person to say, hey, come to our church. This was a young lady who was just kind of, on the streets a little bit and finding her way, but we loved her. And she's the one who turned us on to the church. So that segues into nobody, I just look at everybody the same. Like, I don't put people in different categories. I deal with some of the most influential, wealthiest, powerful people in the world. Most of them are these NBA owners, and I have a great
Yeah.
relationship with them, but I don't look at them any differently than the custodian that works at the arena or the security guards. When I go to the Chase Center, I know them even more so. just being friendly to everybody. So I don't ever delineate people at all. So I think that gives me the ability to help everybody and to be involved with everyone without, feeling a certain way. And I'm not one who, caters to people because they're wealthy or famous, whatever, right? Because I know how temporal that is, right? So, I mean, my foundation has just been on normalcy, like being regular and treating everybody the same. And that's kind of my staple. And, Jesus was that way, right? He got criticized, by hanging with, people that were the sinners. And he said, those are the people that need help. So,
Yeah.
I mean, there's a model for that, right? In terms of everyone that you extend yourself to, like it doesn't really matter. We're all sinners. We're all trying to find our way. And, what I've learned is there's so many people I've seen that from the outside think, oh man, they got the world by the tail. But when I spend time with them, and I would not want to be in their shoes when I see their family dysfunction or
Mm.
just their materialism and I'm not comfortable in that. I like a normal setting. And I think I bring that to my business, that I just treat everyone regular, treat them fairly, and try to be as transparent and honest as possible. But mostly everything is God centered, right? Like that's the foundation of that's my prism for everything in my life is, the scripture and, God's influence and just the blessings I received because I've been consistent with that for the majority of my life.
Hmm. The human soul is a leaky thing, and we drift. How do you retain that center, what you're talking about? And what is God as the anchor for you in your business life? And how does that manifest in daily rhythms
It,
that you keep yourself being able
well,
to treat
it's
everybody the same?
well, it's the simple scripture that you're in the world, but not of the world, right?
Mm.
So you're in these environments, and you pop in and out, and then you go back to what is your core. And for me, it's all scripture based. So, like discipline, like treating people, well, like and I have a very good friend I grew up with. He's a strong believer, and we talk all the time. And he always kind of pushes me, like, you have to make sure you're, sharing your beliefs with people. And I do that all the time. Even when I speak publicly, I
Mhm.
profess my faith in Jesus. And I feel like my mom always told me, because I'm Catholic, grew up Catholic. My mom said, you're like a priest. She told me that when I was young. I was trying to help my friends or whomever, counseling people. So I like to help people. I like to
Mm.
help people feel good about themselves, give people encouragement. So it's kind of like a mission, if you
Mm.
will. And it carries over into, dealing with the highest level professional athletes. And they need the same amount of attention that someone who's homeless, believe it or not. So everyone
Yeah.
needs, that type of support, that type of instruction, and that type of guidance. Because if you are rooted in the world, you will be lost, you will be unsatisfied, and you
Mhm.
won't experience the fulfillment that is the real true essence of fulfillment and happiness and peace, most of all.
Yeah. By the way, as an aside, I was the NBA Finals right now. I was because I'm rooting for the Mavs because I actually really like Luka Doncic just as a player, as a
Mm-hmm.
person. But then I was reading up on Celtics, and I was like, oh man, Jason Tatum's a Christian. Darn it! And now I can't
Yeah,
root against him that much. But he's a
yeah,
player
yeah.
that's been pretty out there about his faith, and uh, and I think you can tell when I see him interviewed at least. What kind
Yeah,
of
I don't know if people have noticed. Yeah, I don't know if people have noticed, but a lot of these young athletes are really professing their faith, like publicly, like in post
yeah
game interviews or just in interviews, and I love that. Right, so they're doubling down on their beliefs.
yeah
So and you get cynical in the world. You think, and there's a lot of craziness that these athletes are exposed to, but I think at their core, if you did an analysis, I think half these guys are really solid. They're believers, and they're
mm,
trying to do things the right way, and they're trying to reject the temptations of the world, which
yeah.
everybody does. So I'm inspired when I hear stories like that.
Yeah. Yeah. I was reading about Brock Purdy recently, the Bay Area phenomenon, very outspoken about his faith. And the writer in the San Francisco Chronicle was trying to say, why is it that there's maybe a higher percentage of people of faith in the professional athletic space than in other spaces?
Hmm.
And the journalist was saying, well, when you're in that world, you know how one bad turn can, you know, blow a knee and ruin your career, or one bad hit, or you actually have to live with faith and trust because you're so constantly exposed to
Yeah.
high level risk that can, totally change your life. And so God is, and of course, as a scholar of religion, I recognize what is an instrumentalization of faith, where like faith provides some sort of like psychological counterbalance to whatever you have, and so it kind of makes God into a a positive thinking. So I discount that, but I do think it is interesting that some of these players, as young men, I mean, Luka Doncic is 25, and the types of pressures and expectations that he's exposed to are enormous. And what would
Yeah.
be, so Bill, you mentioned about, maybe half of these players are kind of pretty solid guys trying to do things the right way. For the other half, not assuming they're all terrible people, but for the other half, what is their center? What do they come to as sort of like, this is what my life's about. I want to do this. What is that spot for them in their world?
Well, unfortunately, there's a lot of illicit, activities, which is unfortunately pretty prevalent in our culture in general.
Yeah.
And I find a lot of these athletes lose their way because of the materialism. There's so many temptations around, whether it's gambling or women, in case, as is the case for the male athletes. There's just a lot out there, and I really, don't envy the position a lot of my clients are in, where they can't go anywhere in public. People are all over them, and it's just surreal, and it's hard for them to really get people around them that they know really care about them. So there's just a lot of superficiality that, unfortunately,
Right.
a lot of times on your upbringing too. If you have solid parents, Brock
Right.
Purdy, I'm sure, has a solid foundation, right? But some
Yeah.
of these kids come from environments where there's just no anchor, like there's
Right.
no foundation, and then they're
Right.
thrust in this thing, and it is a lot of pressure.
Yeah.
I mean, I always use this analogy, like if you're a music entertainer or an actor, you can make a movie, cut, let's redo it, this or that. Or when you're in concert, like you could miss up a few notes, but nobody's really paying attention.
Yeah.
But if you make a mistake and you're an athlete and it's on national or international television, like you're getting just vilified like immediately. Like it's a lot of pressure, man. So
Yeah.
I just know that what they're exposed to, and on top of what you said earlier, they were young. Like
Yeah.
to be in that position without being fully mature or understanding like money, fame, the false adulation, like you have to really have good people around you. And I feel like I'm an anchor for them, like to bring that stability, not the highs and lows getting caught up, but just to be that agent of stability. And the people that work with them around me, we bring that type of foundation. And I think it helps them a lot.
Yeah. Tell me more. I'm curious about your role and how you relate. I mean, you have, last time I checked, you and your team have over 100 and some players under contract, but I imagine it's a case by case basis. But what kind of role do you have in their lives beyond the contractual signing, deals sort of role
Yeah.
of them?
Yeah. Yeah. We do all their business, their contracts, their marketing, endorsements, PR, charitable work, things of that nature. But
Hmm.
I've kind of grown to the point where I'm kind of like a mentor,
Hmm.
or because I'm so much older, like a guru. So they kind of know, Duff he has the answers. He's seen it before. What do you
Yeah.
think? So I just bring that aged, I hope it's wisdom, but just experience to just tell them this is what we need to do. This is what you're experiencing, and things are going to be okay. Or this is what you need to do: make adjustments or eliminate this, eliminate that, things of that nature. So I know it brings a lot of comfort to the players and their families because they know I have so much experience, and they
Right.
also know that I'm going to be like have their best interest at heart, and they really believe that, which is important.
Right. Right. Yeah. These players are young. Say you're a, 5-star recruit in college and you're going high in the draft or whatever. Your parents are in their 40s, maybe their 50s, and they're
Oh
saying,
yeah,
wow, what world is my son going to go into? And
yeah,
I mean, tell me about the types of pressure that these families are under when,
yeah,
hundreds of millions of dollar contracts are on the line. And and these are teenagers that have God-given
yeah,
abilities to play
yeah,
basketball. But I would imagine if I was a parent, I just had my first daughter last month. I doubt she'll be a professional athlete given her genetics, but as a
You never
parent,
know.
I would be very grateful to know that someone such as yourself was in the picture. But
Yeah.
tell me about your relationship with the parents of these athletes.
Well, it started out when I was first doing this that the parents were old enough to be my parents, and then they were my age, and now the
Yeah.
parents are old enough to be my children. So,
Right.
you know, so I've dealt with all of that, right? But it's really just I was with a top player's parent yesterday in the South, and she told me, she goes, "Oh, I know who you are. I've studied you and heard about you, and I just want people like you around my son."
Hmm.
And so I think I've just tried to develop a great reputation of integrity over all these years, and then obviously trying to do a great job with negotiating contracts and managing the players. And I call it like from cradle to grave. Like once you're with us, we want to make sure your post career, you've invested wisely, you've got the good money managers around you, and then you have
Right.
secondary career or complete your education. So it's really just like I have 5 children, as you know, and now a
Hmm.
grandchild. I think my granddaughter's close to the same age as your child. Your
Was that
child,
is that your first granddaughter?
yeah, on Mother's Day, Geneva had her baby on Mother's Day.
No,
So
you know
yeah,
that, yeah, because Geneva sent me that picture. Me and Sarah had our
yeah,
daughter on Mother's Day.
I
Uh,
know. Well,
no, no, no,
we're gonna
excuse
have
me. No,
one.
no, no, excuse me. I preached on Mother's Day, much to my wife's chagrin.
Okay.
We had May 9th,
Uh,
our little girl arrived. But yeah,
okay.
congratulations
Yeah.
to you.
Yeah. So I mean, thank you. So I mean, I have practice as being a parent of 5 from age 31 to 22. So
Mhm.
you're acting as a parent or a surrogate or a mentor for my parents and their children who are our clients. So it's just like you're a pastor and you teach us, you nurture us. You guys are amazing, and so I try to be that more in a business realm, not just all scripture, but just with guidance, leadership. Giving them the right information and teaching the right morals and
Mhm.
values that I think will help them be successful and to, do well with their family lives and with their careers and when they transition into other careers, things of that nature.
Where did you get the business acumen and the legal understanding to negotiate all this stuff? Was that what you studied in college or?
Not really. I was like, when I was a young kid, I was that kid who could name every player in any sport, like their
Oh.
hometown, their batting average, or their college career, their parents' names. Like I just retained everything. So I was, and I still am kind of an encyclopedia for a lot of sports. So
Hmm.
then, you get older. I was, pursuing sports myself, but then when I had to transition into the business, I just knew so much just from my self education. I studied general humanities in college, social sciences, and then
Hmm.
PR. So I didn't have like a legal background or an MBA, but just with all the experiences I've had and studying and then, doing this for a long period of time, I've developed pretty good mastery of all of these different arts that are
Mhm.
necessary to represent athletes. But most of it is just guidance, leadership, communication, and being present, right, to guide them and support them.
Tell me about you're helping these young men and their families negotiate that, but people are also trying to promote you and highlight you. How do you personally um, relate to that? Um, I put in mind article in the New York Times some time ago about a famous incident where a clerical error cost a player, Anthony Carter, some serious cash, and you decided just to pay him back personally. It's like $3 million, and this sort of um,
It was 4.1 million.
but the credibility capital that accrued to you out of that really actually is turned a potential negative into it seems like a pretty big positive for you. I think that's an amazing example of you being a person of principle. And I'm sure you didn't do it because you knew it would end up in the New York Times. Probably just did it because it's the right thing to do. But I just find that inspiring. So I guess I'm curious, like, say some words. You've already said it, but in terms of how people who are trying to put your name in lights, What does Bill Duffy do in response to that?
Yeah. Well, the Anthony Carter story is really interesting because I don't know if you know this, but his son is a potential lottery pick in this draft. I'm representing his son. So
Really?
it's come full circle.
Where does
But
his son play
yeah,
ball?
he was ACC Player of the Year at Providence, and he's going to be a lottery pick likely in this coming draft. But
Wow.
here we are 30 years later. And because of
Wow.
our relationship and, you know, he supported me at the time, I supported him, and now he's handing me his son to guide
Wow.
him. So that's kind of interesting.
Incredible.
But yeah, but I mean, to your point, you know, there's right and there's wrong, and I don't believe in sketchiness. As far as the self promotion, I don't get caught up in all that. I like simplicity. I like quiet. I don't want all the fanfare. You know, I'm behind the scenes, more the kingmaker instead of the king. And I've had enough shine. I also think a lot of agents, when they get a lot of notoriety, because it's a very visible platform.
Mhm.
I played basketball. I played on national television. I was drafted in the NBA, so I've had my shine. So now
Mhm.
it's, you know, I need to move on, and it's time for the other players to shine, the younger players. So my job is to promote them and not to promote myself. So I'm pretty low key about that.
It would seem that's a hard transition. If you're a young person and you're just you're an athletic phenomenon in your little world, and then you move into successively bigger worlds, but by the time that you're 30, your whole life has been adulation. Oh my gosh, you're the most amazing thing in the world. How do players transition out of that? Now you're 48. You used to play basketball, but I would imagine what you're articulating is a graceful transition from your shine to putting others in that place.
Yeah.
I would imagine that's spiritually challenging for a lot of athletes. Yes.
Well, very, very few athletes can transition into a normal life or a regular occupation where
Right.
they're just like the rest of us.
Right.
Um, and you know, I remember kind of off the grid here, but OJ Simpson, they used to say that he never wanted to go to Europe, and they asked him why with his family because nobody there recognized him, right?
Mm.
Like he just didn't
Wow.
like to be a place where people weren't glorifying him. So, you know, when your identity is so public, and then all of a
Mhm.
sudden you disappear, it's really tough for these athletes when they're no longer in the spotlight, and then
Right.
people look at them like, "Oh, you used to be so and so." Well, no, I'm
Right.
still that person, but I'm not. You're just not current, and you're not as relevant. But that shows you how
Right.
superficial it is. So you can't get caught up in that. The other thing is, you know, I always advise the athletes, like, you know, you have so much talent, you have all these qualities, like you work hard, you have a work ethic, you're smart. Like you have to find something else to apply that in a different
Right.
profession or a different focus, whatever it is, and
Right.
replicate it. Try to match that with something else. Now, don't be foolhardy, like investing in crazy things, but develop a skill set and a work ethic so you can use the same
Yes.
type of tools to be successful in something else. And a lot of them find it and then they become really successful because they have it, but a lot of them just don't find their niche. And they're also, a lot of them are used to
Mm-hmm.
everyone doing everything for them, but now you got to do this on your own.
Yes.
You know, you're not getting teachers
Right.
more lenient when you're in school. You really got to double down if you want to have a skill and a quality that's going to allow you to be
Right.
successful in a secondary profession. So it's tough. A lot of guys
Right.
want to coach and they want to stay in the game. And there's some excellent coaches that are former players, but it's really a really tough transition. And a lot of times they'll call it a slow death because your identity just kind of diminishes. And you're still
Mhm.
young, you're still vibrant, but you just don't have an identity. And
Yeah.
most people, that's what they seek is, you know, relevance, recognition, and identity.
Uh-huh. What happens to some big name players, athletes when I was growing up had some big scandals. I'm thinking of like Alex Rodriguez. I'm thinking of Kobe Bryant. I'm thinking of Tiger Woods. These guys were all, I mean, golden boys, and for me, all heroes growing up. But then they each had a sex scandal, and each of them has recovered and continued their career. But it
Yeah,
certainly changed public perception of them in an irreversible way.
yeah,
And talk to me
yeah.
about.
Well,
Oh, go ahead.
yeah. It's easier to overcome that. The guys, three guys you mentioned, are three of the greatest athletes ever. So for them, when what his recovery is part of his Kobe Bryant, with what he experienced, he came back and became Kobe Bryant, like a superstar. So he was able to kind of reestablish his excellence as an
Yeah.
athlete. So people were probably not as critical of him. I actually deal with Alex Rodriguez because he's one of the minority owners of the Minnesota Timberwolves, and I have 3 clients on the team. So I deal with A-Rod, and I'm
Oh,
I'm impressed with him,
yeah.
with how he's, like I said earlier, he's kind of found his own niche. He's in the
Yes.
finance.
Yep.
He's got a partner, and they're invested in the Minnesota Timberwolves. He does the radio broadcast on baseball. He's excellent at that.
Mhm.
And then I think Tiger Woods, when you study him, it's like, I mean, he was the guy, and some history. I guess his dad was kind of the same way, so he saw some of that promiscuity. Wasn't too
Yeah.
far from his upbringing, and kind of
Right.
replicated his dad's activity. But I always say that when you're in a high profile situation, there's always pressure, and everybody has a vice. Everyone, you have to have some type of release mechanism. The question
Right.
is, what is it? It can
Right.
be good or it can be bad. Sometimes it's prayer, which is
Yeah.
one of mine. Sometimes it's working out. Sometimes it's another activity, but it can
Right.
also go the other way. It could be drugs. It could be alcohol. It could be
Yeah.
sexualizing. Like, it could be a number of things. So hopefully you can pick the right vice to counter that pressure. That
Yeah.
releases that pressure, because what you're exposed to at this level is not normal, and not very many
Right.
people can handle it. And that's why so many people freak out. And that's why these young celebrities, not just athletes, you've seen countless stories, whether it's Britney Spears or these child actors
Right.
who commit suicide. They just can't handle this false adulation and the pressure. And then it's
Right.
hard to measure who's really for me. And in many cases, even the family sees you as a meal ticket. And so you really don't have any safe harbor.
Yes.
That's why, to me, if you can really connect with Jesus, like, that's, as we learn every Sunday, from you guys, and just through our own education, like, it's the anchor that allows you to feel comfortable in your own skin. And then you're not
Right.
reliant on the world's validation of you. It's internal.
Exactly.
And if you can really get to that point, and that's where I am, like, I am so prayerful and I'm so dedicated that it gives me power, like, to deal with all this. Like, I just, in my inner resolve, like,
Mm.
I pray all the time. I'm listening to tapes, like, put my armor up in every situation. And because I'm in a crazy situation, my life is insane, but
Mhm.
I have that power that's manifested internally from Jesus. And
Mhm.
it's really palpable, and it helps me get through. It also keeps things in perspective when
Yeah.
things are awry. Like, just slow down, appreciate what you have, be thankful. Don't get caught off center. So I just
Right.
live that, and I'm happy to share that, because I think there's an internal way to deal with all the pressures in life and keep things in the right perspective, in the right
Yeah.
context.
Yeah. And so many of those, as you alluded, so many of those coping mechanisms we learn from our parents, or we learn from what's around
Yes,
us. So it's hard to
it's
unlearn.
inherited.
It's hard to unlearn
Yeah,
those when you've
yeah.
when
That
you've just had it embedded so long.
Yeah. Well, it's like a father who neglects his children. That's usually a result of a father who neglected, you.
Right.
And then
Right.
I always tell people, like, if you go into a strip club anywhere in the United States or anywhere, there's a 99% chance that the young lady who's in the strip club did not have a good relationship with her father. Right? You can study that,
Mm-hmm.
because a woman who is validated by a man's presence is less likely to take her clothes off. And to me, like, and I have 2 daughters, and I've thought of that, and I've loved them. I've told them about, what's important, like the sanctity of themselves. And
Yeah.
hearing that from a man, I think is important. And that's, getting to the
Yes.
family, like
Yeah.
the foundation of the family, and
Yeah.
having that foundation, that basis, and that education, I think, is critically important. But having a solid family, I think when you look at our culture in general, there's so much family dysfunction, and high divorce rate, broken homes,
Yep.
and it carries over to the children, their insecurities,
Yeah.
things of that nature. So there's a lot that impacts how people see themselves, and their prism of the world based on the foundation they come from. I'm fortunate. I was with parents that were married for 50 years, and my mom was a saint. My dad was a hard worker. He was a military man. So I had a good balance of that,
Mhm.
spiritual foundation on a daily basis, and then a toughness for my dad with the military, like orderly, organized, things of that nature. So I've been
Mm.
very, very blessed to come from a solid foundation. So I've been the beneficiary of that.
Well, you've reproduced yourself in five amazing children, and you've got some great kids, and they're going to do amazing things. Your son Christian is, I just love that guy. He's going to do amazing things. He looks so much like you, and yeah.
Well, he thinks he's much more handsome because people tell him that.
Okay. Bill, what would you, if you're a young athlete listening to this, what would you say to a young athlete who's trying to say, maybe I have a future in sports at the collegiate level, beyond the
Yeah,
collegiate level? What do you seed into that person?
you go for it. Like, go for it. If you love sports, do the best you can. If you can earn a scholarship, get your education, gain experience. But yeah, it's great. Sports is great. Camaraderie, discipline, the friendships you build. I mean, my closest friends are former athletes, teammates of mine. Like, you get to travel, you get to meet people, you get to compete. Like, there's great lessons in that, but just take it for what it's worth. It's just a step, but you got to build your mind as well as your body. So you have to be resourceful. So you're not just reliant on one path.
Mm-hmm.
So, I was consumed with basketball, but I was, fixated on education and, being, articulate, developing my vocabulary and public speaking, things that have served me well. So just take advantage of the exposure. And if you're lucky enough to play at a high level, you have an advantage because there's visibility. People know who you are, and you can build a good reputation with visibility behind you. So I would just say keep it in the right, context, but don't go for it. Like, do the best you can, go as far as you can, and enjoy the experience.
Mm-hmm. I was really, I loved seeing Stephen Curry finishing up his sociology degree at Davidson, like what, last year or something.
Yeah,
He's just pushing it
yeah,
through. He's going to write that
yeah,
thesis, and
yeah.
that's awesome.
He's checked all the boxes. He's a
Yeah,
Christian. He's a great athlete. He's a father. He's a businessman. He's a humanitarian, philanthropist,
yeah,
like, humble. I love him. I think he's an amazing human being. I know him, and I really respect him immensely.
yeah. Yeah, I don't know him, but I also respect him immensely. And as a high school point guard, I also live vicariously through him. And whenever I'm out on the driveway chucking up shots from 45 feet, I feel like I'm Stephen Curry. None of them
Yeah,
go in, but it's fun to pretend.
yeah, yeah. Well, the beauty of Steph Curry is that he's maintained his humility, and we've learned this. I've learned this in church. I think your father may have said this, but when you're given something, whether any type of success or prosperity, you can really tell the type of person you are, because if you're a good person, you'll be more generous, you'll be more humble. If you're a bad person, you'll be more greedy or more consumed with material things. So
Yeah.
I think he's an example of someone who, as great as he is, he's obviously immensely wealthy. He's just a generous soul. So he's shown the goodness, and that's his curve has been on the side of greatness and humility and integrity, which is so inspiring. So he's a
Yeah.
definite amazing role model.
Yeah. I always find it fascinating to watch these post-game interviews, whether right after the game or, in the press room afterwards, whatever. And some players who are not as good as Curry sometimes talk as if they were like really big. And then you'll get Curry and he's just like super chill and humble. And I've always found that interesting. It's like a contrast.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
and but it applies everywhere. I mean, there's ego in the ministry world too. There's ego in the church space, the author space, the academic space. My goodness, there's some
yeah,
academic rock stars. But then
yeah,
there's there's profound saints and humble people in that world too. And their humility is part of their. For example, someone I think of, I worked with a very well-known theologian named N.T. Wright. And I mean, I've just never
hmm
been around a genius whose mind just froths with ideas and wisdom like this. I mean, just profound. And but a truly humble, self-effacing, not into himself sort of human. And I don't think that's incidental. I think that humility itself is
Mm-hmm.
part of what they have their finger on into the world. Part of the reason that they are great is that it's not an extra add-on.
Yeah.
It's intrinsic to what they've been able to accomplish.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, this is a message for all parents. Like, you can instill that into your children.
Yeah.
No matter what station of life you're in, like, you teach them that, like, they'll follow your guidance. And like I've also heard in church, it's not what's taught, it's what's caught.
Yep.
So, they watch you, they observe how you behave, how you interact with other people. When you have success, how you maintain your humility. When you're having a tough time, how you use that inner resolve to come back, things of
Yep.
that nature. So there's a lot of lessons that you can teach. And I've tried to do that with my children, with my lovely wife, Jamise, because we're definitely a strong team in that regard.
Yeah, and it doesn't end when the kids are little. I mean, like, I'm 36 and I still watch my dad very closely in how he relates to people and how
Oh,
he
yeah.
deals with pressure, how he's, you get a unique insight into your parents' lives because you get to see them in context other people don't. And you continue to learn from them, you know.
100%.
And
100%.
yeah, yeah. My goal is just to be if I could ever be as genuine and good of a human being as my dad is, then I'll be good with that. Still working on it. Not quite there.
No, yeah, I know you well, Ryan. You're on your way. You're both your parents are amazing, and you're in tune for that. So it's coming,
Oh,
forthcoming.
well, thanks for the encouragement. Sometimes I feel like I'm moving backwards, but I'm trying.
No,
I'm
no, you're
trying.
not.
So, well, Bill, this has given me a lot to think about, and thank you for just being who you are. And you didn't have to make time for this, but I appreciate that you did. I know there's NBA Finals game on tonight. Um,
Yep.
but just thank you for your example, and I want it to live on in other people, and it's hopeful too that it's possible to do things of significance in this world that bring attention without your soul having to rot there is a way to do
Be
it.
compromised.
Yeah,
Right.
there is a way to stay
That's right.
centered,
Yeah.
and you're a
Yeah.
you're a real example of how that works. So thank you for that.
Well, it's my pleasure. I appreciate that. I appreciate you and the service that you bring to our community and the church. And keep up the great work. You're helping us all.
Oh, thank you. I will. All right, my friend. Well, I'll see you around
Okay.
church, and
You'll see me on
tonight.
You'll see me on Father's Day.
Yes, I will. Yes, I will. And I'll just
Okay.
say, I hope that Christian Jason Tatum loses tonight. I hope he gets a chance to lean into that Christian humility after a real whooping by the Mavs.
We'll see what happens. Game time in about 5 hours, so we'll see what happens.
All right. Awesome, man. All right. Have a great day, and catch you soon.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you,
Thanks.
Ryan. My pleasure.
Okay.
Thanks, buddy.
Okay.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye.